What we know as time comes and goes in cycles. It's not a straight line as we've been taught. As Comet Atlas returns, let's take a look at some of the plasma striations coming off. Also, King Tut's tomb. Last week was the anniversary, but think about the cyclical time of the rise and fall of great civilizations. We'll take a look at the Great Wall of China and the Book of Kells. Probably never heard of this, 800 AD. Are we at another one of these points? And this is why the world is changing. We're going to look at an enormous amount of images tonight. Stick with me. History is going to blow your mind wide open. What you've been taught as history is, well, an obfuscation. The sands come, the deserts return, and even some of the greatest buildings that have stood for 1,000 years are now beginning to crumble. As we see, our world is starting to crumble. And we do have to ask ourselves, what is happening right now with so much great change happening when we know these cycles of time previously have come and gone, with the apexes of civilizations and the declines of civilizations down to, well, that base point where technology is forgotten, we rebuild it, and then we come to this point again where it collapses down. Now, Comet Atlas, I want to give you an update here with all of this newest information, and some of these graphics I'm going to show you. Do your own research, because I tried to match them up with solar dynamic observatories, and I could not find that same plasma star pattern coming off, even though SDO is down currently along with SOHO. So as we progress of the understanding of this comet, the first evidence for a non-gravitational acceleration of 3I Atlas at perihelion, that was back about the 21st of October, and it was still hidden behind the sun. And as they started to get some better imagery, just as it was coming through the corona, disappearing behind the sun, it took on this, well, people tried to explain it as a Death Star, the shape of it. And this is what it looked like off-gassing, and there's been so many anomalies with it. And BP Earthwatch putting this one out for us here a little bit tight in, but again, pulling all this data from different feeds. Atlas circle there for you, but what does that look like? There's so many theories out right now. Is it or isn't it this or that? But I want to bring you to this image right here. This one's starting to circulate around. All of our solar observatories, at least on the US side, that feed mainly into others are offline. Even the ones at the ESA, with European Space Agency, they seem to be having quite a few problems. So if you're going to look at this, now what it said is after it just became more visible, through the corona again, this is what we're seeing. Now, the size of this would be mind-bogglingly large anyway. This does match up with what they're seeing with plasma arcing and plasma rays, for a better term, coming off of this. But this is the close-up currently what we have. And you look and you say, all right, well, how did they get such clear imagery? I'm not finding this in any of the feeds coming off of solar observatories across the planet. There's still a few online, but it does appear Atlas right in the center there. You'll see that does match up with some other solar astronomy telescopes looking through that very center point there that these rays are radiating off of. And you start to look at some of these plasma petroglyphs that we see across the planet, and you're like, well, does this really match up, or is it you're trying to find something to push something together that's not there? Now, plasma petroglyphs, when our skies become highly electrified, these do indeed show themselves in hold state. And we see these across canyons routinely around the world. People witness this last event prior that reset us. The Fed's out of options, rate cuts, money printing, balance sheet reversals. They call it policy, but it's really panic. This is the end game economics, where hope replaces discipline and the illusion of control finally breaks. They're not cutting rates because things are strong. They're cutting rates because the system is cracking. The labor market's stalling. Confidence in the dollar is fading fast. For decades, the Fed built a house of paper. Now they're striking the match that could burn it down, leaving you to pay the price. Every cycle ends the same. Bubbles, bailouts, and broken retirements. That's why smart investors are moving to what's real. Gold and silver. When's the last time you actually held the wealth you've spent your life working for? My friends at Noble Gold Investments have been helping Americans move from paper wealth into real, tangible assets. Numbers on a screen can disappear, but physical gold and silver, that's lasted through every single crisis in history. Go to 2030gold.com and get your free wealth protection kit today. That's 2030gold.com. Click on that link in the description box below and discover how easy it is to protect your future. And for this holiday season, when you open a qualified account with Noble Gold Investments, you'll receive 10 1-ounce commemorative silver holiday coins, limited edition, and a joyful way to celebrate the season and invest in something real. To this point where we went almost back to zero and we had to rebuild out again. These petroglyphs are warnings for us. Now, is it exactly a star-shaped plasma pattern that we're seeing? No. But the nucleus of the previous slide that I showed you, that's that right there. Again, this caught on Navis Observatory. But the those lines of plasma creating the star configuration is not here. So I went over to Swap to try to find this because currently, as you know, SDO's down, SOHO's down. So we're not getting any like glimpses of the sun and these different angstrom wavelengths that we normally do. I heard the government shutdown's ending, hopefully in the next day or two, and this information will pop back on. If it does indeed pop back on and we start to see that star pattern visible in the size of the sun, you have to realize at the size of the sun, what that plasma star display creating that array and display. Because you got to think about it, we could put 1.2 million Earths inside there. So if you're looking at that star pattern that was coming off of there, you know, how many hundreds of thousands of miles is that going to be? Zoom in. So I was trying to find a northeast quadrant there. That's exactly where that star pattern would have been if it had matched up correctly with the area that we can see on the northeast limb. I just don't see it. It should be visible. I think it's photoshopped in. Be discerning of some of these images. But here we have ultraviolet view of the sun with the magnetic, interaction here, sunspots, and it's such a fascinating star to look at. Electrically powered, and just it's awe-inspiring when you take a look at the power of this and the magnetism that is also in tune with our Earth. But there seems to be, well, the magnetic field of our planet declining at a rapid rate. A lot of things are changing because of that. Human behavior would be one of them. Magnetic field in your brain as well. But I want to bring you the newest images from, again, when this supposed star pattern was emerging. You do see something that looks like that. They're trying to say it's a tail re-emerging. That's some 3 arc minutes across, longer than the full moon by, double to triple now. It does have that radiant shape, but not in all the directions that it was so clear and visible through the corona in that one particular image. So I'm going to call BS on that one and just say, do a little more research. I know some things are offline, a little more difficult to corroborate that, or just outright find that was a fabrication. But this is the newest tail on it as it emerged past the sun. Now, give Diamond a shout out for finding this image here on the 2-meter twin telescope over at Oppenheimer Ranch Project. Dude, what up? So more images are coming, and we can see now 25,000 kilometers just on the nucleus and the illumination off of that. Now, the reason I would bring you this information is as we go through these ebbs and flows of our civilization, you have to wonder what caused these changes. So far, if you look back in history, not one of the single greatest apex civilizations has survived. It is like a fiat currency. It always collapses. From the Minoans to the Egyptians to the Sumerians, the Babylonians, it just does not matter. What is it that it causes this collapse phase? The Romans, the Phoenicians, the Hittites. We are just the latest of the apex societies. And when it does collapse, then what do we find? We find remnants. Now, since last week was the anniversary of King Tut's tomb finding, I thought I'd bring in the black and whites here of the discovery. So when they opened the tomb, this is what it looked like. Now, for me, I don't know why, if you were an emperor, you would have left everything so shambly, if there's a word for that. Earthquakes could explain it. And if there were metals in this, the change of a magnetic field or some sort of disturbance, like in the Bermuda Triangle, could have moved things around. Because one thing, some stories I've read and heard about, family crypts or family vaults for their deceased, a lot of times there were metals in the coffins, and people will go down, years later or whatnot, and they'll find that all the coffins have been moved out of the place. Bermuda Triangle, magnetic anomaly. The same thing could have happened here quite easily. And these are the different objects that they had found. So think about what was required to go to the afterlife according to their beliefs, myths, but they were using a lot of hallucinogens to touch into the other side over there. A lot of star worship, a lot of energy worship. They understood plasma. They understood creating and harnessing the very fabric of our universe. I'm wondering where a lot of this technology that the Egyptians used to have has gone. Like their stone drilling techniques are just impossible of what they've told us on how things can be even put in place. Just the whole construction of the pyramids. Like there was a huge amount of seriously high advanced tech, even above what we have today, that was being used some 3,500 years prior. And if we go back to the actual construction of the pyramids, even further back, when they would bury their dead, you look at this and say, well, they wanted this person to be around, a coffin within a sarcophagus, within birch sap, within pine sap, different resins to seal it off. And then it was within gold, and then encased in gold with wrapped resins around that. It was just incredible. And it just, that's doable with the way that metallurgy could have been done, sculpting the face. And, you see a few famous artifacts. But to sculpt marble like this is nearly impossible unless you're 3D printing it. And this is supposedly, 550 years ago, something, using just rudimentary chisels. I mean, we today literally cannot replicate this. I've seen some really good tries using a very much softer stone. Museums of Europe have something, but it's not. Looks like it's folded fabric on the print. This is so, again, high tech, very difficult, if not almost impossible to replicate with the techniques using chisels, even with our finer tools that we have today to work with this. This has to be 3D printed. And again, you look at that and say, what type of engineering was available at the time? That, again, it's this ebb and flow of things that come to us and disappear from us that we have to rediscover again. Or is it purposely being withheld? Government's coming back on again. Apparently the government has, with the United States, has found itself back in action, for a better term. But this 3-eye atlas is a perfect way to spook people. And if it were to be more visible and it does become a craft, this will collapse the global economy. And it'll be a great way to bring in a digital currency after that. So every time there is a collapse of a civilization, the way money and wealth and value moves through, it holds itself in the same state, gold, silver, land, this sort of thing, tools, etc. Something hard good can be brought through that transition to have value in the next world. But in today's world, what do you think would have that? So here's the Great Wall of China. A lot of people talking about Tartaria. It was on that side to keep the Chinese out. Disputed at best, but these are some of the images going far back into the 1800s. And you start to look at that and say, well, there really weren't passages. How were these things closely guarded? It was not visible from space, as they told us. It was too thin. It ran like a pencil line through the planet. You have to really zoom down on it. You can't just see it from space, as they said. But this thing was stretching over mountain ranges, through deserts, all the way down to the sea. Who were they trying to keep out? Mongol invaders, that's a great story, but there has to be something else to this. It was not just a simple wall built. Again, the stories were given of why this construction project was undertaken, there has to be something different with it. I'll leave it up to you as to which nationalities were on which side trying to keep which side out. Because to build something like this, hundreds of years, supposedly in our traditional timelines, but what if it could have been constructed faster? Like this was something on a multi-century project. So even feuds amongst nations generally don't last 200 to 300 years. They would have gone through collapse phases, changes in precipitation. Their crops would have failed like many a time in China, many a time through Mongolia, Russia. So you start to see these ebbs and flows of crop production are the main driver of what we can do in our modern world, of how we feed the populace and how they're able to hold that together. So if you're talking over multi-centuries and going through Chinese history, you're not going to be able to keep that really for 300 years of consistent, constant building. Because as the emperor and the dynasty collapses every 400 years, there's not been one that lasted more than 400 years. But the construction dates for the Great Wall, generally an emperor would come in and absolutely raze and destroy everything, and like, I mean, break it down to granite dust on the ground and rebuild from the ground up of their dynasty. That was a common thing. Previous dynasty, you wiped everything known out about them and you restarted. So generally that takes about 100 years. Then they kind of get into this power phase for a couple of 100 years, and then they decline right off of that. So you're looking at a solid 200 years of building. So if one emperor had collapsed on the traditional timeline for this, there'd be a 200-year gap in between the continuation of construction. Hostilities lasting for 600 years between? I don't think so. Because it's a new emperor, it's a new power structure that would then have new trade with different factions, entities, countries, fiefdoms, kingdoms, however you like to term that. Moguls, kings, queens, Raj. There's many names for these power brokers on the planet that control regions. 300 years later, you're still angry at somebody? No, I don't think so. Things have moved on. So the whole construction story of the Great Wall in itself, it leaves a lot of gaps in dates. I'm going to say that. And I would highly encourage you to look at how precipitation patterns moved when magnetic field anomalies also occurred on regular cyclical patterns in the sun on a 400-year cycle that also is responsible for that 400-year collapse cycle of, well, at least the Chinese emperors. Forgotten. The Book of Kells. I hadn't heard of this one either, and I popped up on one of my historical feeds. Thought I'd bring it to you here. Trinity College scanned this one. This is approximately 800 AD from Dublin. A lot of different iconography and Celtic sacred geometry throughout. And then if you pull in a little further, I'm not sure if these are the four horsemen. And I'm not sure if it's the four archangels, Michael, Raphael, Anael, Gabriel, or what this represents. You know, the representation of it might not be exactly as we're supposed to be told to believe it is. Things through history have come and gone. And this comet, whatever it turns out to be, is a significant, going to be part of our skies. This thing will be front and center right around Christmas, closest to our planet, visible. And from now through the next, say, 5 to 6 weeks, are they going to try to meld these traditions together? Is this a returning star? One thing I will say, if it does have this sort of plasma star formation that's extending out 1,000,000 miles, 500,000 miles, 100,000 miles off of its nucleus, and it is visible from our planet, with that star formation of plasma tendrils coming off of it, this could very well be reconstrued as the star that led those to the manger and the birth of Christ, the North Star, some special star in the sky. Will that be a signal? Can you imagine the disruption in just daily life of this biblical sign coming back at a prophecy time of the end of the world, coming into the tribulation period, for a better term. And could this be used partially to reset the economy, or to move another part of the reset further down, with that chess piece moving just one square up? I'll let you decide. After all, it's your mind and how you interpret history. I do thank you for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. Please support our sponsor, Victor Nutrition International Protovite Plus 1-pack 100 nutrients. That link's in the description box below, vni.life/civilization. Use the code CYCLE20 to take 20% off your order. And please remember, every purchase you make helps keep this channel on air, bringing information just like this. I will see you next time. Bye for now.